If you go to Saudi Arabia and you look around, you drive on the roads, you see the universities, you see the hospitals, you see the mosques, they were built by bin Laden's father. He created, in many respects, modern Saudi Arabia. So that is the shadow that looms over young Osama bin Laden, who is one of 54 children of this man.
Somebody like Osama bin Laden was growing up in the 70s. He was definitely infected with this religious awakening that happened in Saudi Arabia, but it happened all around the Middle East.
In October 1979, the first Islamic revolution in modern history took place when radical groups headed by Ayatollah Khomeini toppled the Shah of Iran. The revolution inspired radical Islamists from most of the Middle East to try to put paid to corrupt Arab regimes, also in Saudi Arabia. A few months after the revolution in Iran, an event in Mecca, the holiest city in Saudi Arabia, made a profound impression on rich man's son, Osama bin Laden.
In 1979, there was a group of radical Muslims who took over the mosque in Mecca, the grand mosque where every Muslim is supposed to make a pilgrimage once in his lifetime.
What should have been a peaceful week of prayer turned into a massacre.
Dozens, perhaps hundreds of people were killed in this incident. The royal family called on the bin Laden family to help them because they had all the plans for the mosque to help expel these radicals. But young Osama was clearly paying attention to the statements that these radicals were making against the royal family, against the impurity and the corruption of that family, against the way that Islam is being practiced in modern times. All these things made an impression on him.
In 1979 was also the year in which the Soviet Union invaded Muslim Afghanistan. The Soviet army entered Afghanistan in support of a local Marxist coup the previous year. The occupation shook most of the Muslim world, including Osama bin Laden's Saudi compatriots.
One of the obsessions of Saudi Arabia is the spread, always has been the spread of communism or Marxism in the Arab world. Communism stands for atheism, and they're ideologically opposed to any form of either the economics of communism or the atheism of communism.
One of Osama bin Laden's lecturers in politics at university in Saudi Arabia, the Palestinian Imam Abdullah Azam, called for Muslims to embark on a holy war in Afghanistan. Jihad has been degraded to peaceful meetings, which start with Pepsi and end with a meal of rice and meat. It has become a crime to carry a sword. It has become a source of embarrassment for the people. Being armed has become barbarism and savageness.
Abdullah Azam was the imam in the mosque at the King Abdulaziz University, which is where bin Laden was a student, and they got to be friends. And bin Laden would bring him over to his apartment and invite his friends over to hear Azam talk about the obligations of young Muslims to participate in jihad against the occupying power of the Soviets in Afghanistan. And the two men formed a kind of partnership. Azam was the charismatic spiritual leader, and Osama was the money man. And he began going around collecting donations.
The occupation of Afghanistan soon turned into a bloody civil war, in which local Muslim militias, known as Mujahideens, engaged in guerrilla warfare with Soviet troops. As part of the Cold War, the United States supplied the Mujahideens with arms and ammunition.
Russian
Large numbers of fellow Muslims began to travel to Afghanistan to take part in the Holy War. And in 1984, Abdullah Azzam, with help from Osama bin Laden, opened a service office in Pakistan, just a few kilometers from the Afghan border. The Egyptian jihadist Ayman al-Zawahiri was to join them.
I often think about the day that Zawahiri spotted bin Laden. He was a younger man, 7 years younger than Zawahiri. He was idealistic. He was not so much charismatic as he had a mystique about him. He was quiet, shy, but a Saudi, and he had a lot of money. He had a dream. He wanted to create this foreign legion of Arab fighters. But he had nobody who was remotely capable of carrying out those dreams. Now, Zawahiri was not that kind of man. He was an ideologue, a propagandist, hardened by his years in prison.
They shocked us with electricity, and they used their wild ducks, and they hanged us over the edges of the doors with our hands tied at the back.
He had recruited army officers, policemen, technocrats like himself, who were very capable men. Bin Laden had none of that, and so he gave them to bin Laden.
The idea of the Service Bureau was, you know, we'll help you with your travel to the Afghan-Pakistan border, we'll find housing for you, bin Laden will pay for you and your family to living expenses, and then we'll send you, the ones who are actually going to fight, we'll send you to a particular Afghan party inside Afghanistan that's actually fighting the Soviets.
The young warriors rode on their belief that Afghanistan might become the Islamic State of the future. The mood was almost revolutionary.
They were very idealistic. A lot of them spoke English or other languages. They were university students. They were highly motivated.
I could compare them, you know, with many young Westerners who try to go to Cuba, to go to Bolivia, to fight for communist freedom liberation movements, you know. The image is Che Guevara. Of course, they were religiously minded, but they were internationalists. We are not Arabs, we are not Afghans, we are internationalists, and we are sacrificing our life because we know that we will probably be killed. It doesn't matter. The cause is more important than us. They left families, positions, studies, and all that, you know. So I recognize, I would say, an ultra-left ambiance, which I myself shared, you know, in the early 70s.
But the Arab warriors were also on a religious mission.
They wanted to help in implementing the Sharia. They wanted to train themselves and fulfill the obligation, in fact, upon every youth in Islam. The Muslim youth, the Muslim male is obliged to train for jihad at the age of 15.